Hello and welcome back to Listen Bro podcast. My name is Joe and I'm joined by my brother and co-host.
My name is Ethan and I am hijacking this episode.
What?
Yep, I'm not going to give Joe a chance to tell a story this week because, well, my story's super long. And it actually works out. We had been planning this as an element of the podcast to surprise each other with a hijacking every once in a while. And this week Joe's sick, so it worked out for me to do it. So he kind of knew this one was coming, but the plan was to make these complete surprises for everybody. But that being said, if you're new here, welcome. Normally we would both tell a story in the episode. This time you got just me. If you want to see pictures, check out the video version of this podcast, either on your podcast player like Spotify or on YouTube, because I have a bunch of photos to go with the story that I think add a lot to it, because these are actual photos taken during the events. So, pretty exciting.
I am excited for this one.
And then check out Listen Bro Pod on Instagram for photos. Actually, this week we've been bad about posting them, but
yes, we have.
We try to get
slacked off with it too, some, but
yeah, we try to get one or two posts throughout the week of just whatever photos are relevant to the stories we most recently told on the podcast. But check that out, and this is a long one, so I'm gonna get into it. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. This is the great story of Ernest Shackleton. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I have not.
Good. This is a great story. Ernest Shackleton was born February 15th, 1874 in Ireland, and his family moved to London when he was 10. Rather than becoming a doctor like his father was, Ernest Shackleton joined the Merchant Navy when he was 16, apprenticing aboard a sailing vessel. Now, the Merchant Navy is like the shipping industry.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
he was fighting Navy.
No. So he was learning, how to be a crew member on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
After working his way up the ranks, Shackleton joined Robert Falcon Scott. Sorry, there's photos of him as a kid. Merchant shipping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, some big boats. That was just the type of ship that would be used at the time. I don't know that he was on that one specifically.
And he learned how to use those as a kid?
He was like 16 when he started.
Oh, okay.
Shackleton joined Robert Falcon Scott on the ship Discovery for the British National Antarctic Expedition from 1901 to 1903. On this trip, Shackleton was part of a three-man team that trekked deep into Antarctica, setting a record for the farthest south anyone had ever been, reaching beyond 82 degrees of latitude. And that yellow point there on the map is how far they made it.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And unfortunately, though, Shackleton was sent home early from this expedition because he became ill with scurvy. But he was part of that three-man team that trekked that far in, so he was, he held the record for furthest south anybody had ever been.
Wow.
Only a few years later, Shackleton would lead his first Antarctic expedition aboard the ship called Nimrod. And his goal, once again, was to be the first to reach the South Pole. On this trip, Shackleton brought along an Errol Johnson car. That car company was trying to make something that people could take on these expeditions, but the vehicle couldn't really go past the Great Ice Barrier. The ground just wasn't smooth enough, didn't have the right kind of tires, that kind of thing.
I don't know why. I'm just kind of surprised that a car could drive in that cold of temperatures.
Yeah, and they were specifically made for that, so I don't know if they made any modifications with that in mind.
Yeah.
Gasoline instead of diesel would hold up better, colder.
Yeah.
So the Nimrod expedition departed from England in August 1907 And the ship first sailed to New Zealand, and there began the journey to Antarctica, where the ship arrived in early 1908. Shackleton's party would ultimately fail in its mission to reach the South Pole, falling short by just over 100 miles. They made it past 88 degrees of latitude.
Oh, the horse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They had horses and they would take dogs to help move stuff. And then there's the kind of, when they were traveling, they'd be pulling these sleds with their supplies because their treks would take a long time, several weeks.
Yeah.
His decision to turn back short of the South Pole demonstrated that he valued the life of his men over his own success and glory. The trek was originally planned to take 91 days, which would require about 19 miles of travel each day. But by the second week, they were averaging only 7 miles a day, so less than half.
Ooh, wow.
By cutting rations, Shackleton and the 3 men who accompanied him managed to survive 120 days instead of just 90. And they traveled 1,755 miles, setting a new record. The Nimrod expedition did, in fact, have its own successes as well, despite missing the goal of reaching the South Pole. A separate group of Shackleton's men had reached the magnetic South Pole, which isn't the same as the geographic South Pole. So the geographic North and South Poles are based on the rotation of the Earth. That would be like the center point.
Mm-hmm.
The magnetic pole shifts. So it's not perfectly in line.
And that's the one that affects like compasses and stuff, right?
Correct, yeah. And and all that affects navigation and all that, depending how close or far you are from the magnetic pole. But some of his guys reached the magnetic South Pole. They were the first to do that. And they were also the first to climb Mount Erebus, the planet's southernmost volcano.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never would have expected a volcano down there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, despite not reaching the South Pole, like I said, this was a new record for the farthest anyone had ever traveled south. And you can see that dot on the map shows how far they made it that time.
Oh, man.
And that was where he made it before with Robert Scott. So a significant...
Yeah. It looks so close on a map, but...
Right. And it's about 100 miles from the South Pole. So they were, were close, but the difference between that and his first expedition with Robert Scott is
huge.
Pretty big, yeah. But this meant the race to the South Pole was still on. He returned to England an instant celebrity. He was knighted by the King of England in 1909, hence being called Sir Ernest Shackleton. Okay. And over the next few years, he would earn money giving speeches about the expedition. He was actually a great speaker, and the money he earned from these speaking engagements helped pay off the debt that he took on to conduct the Nimrod expedition.
Okay.
But, like I mentioned, the race to the South Pole was still on. In 1909, Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen was planning to be the first person to reach the North Pole. But he found out an American, Robert Peary, had beat him. Now, Amundsen had already arranged to borrow a ship from Fridtjof Nansen for an expedition to the North Pacific Arctic region. Now, Nansen had already planned to use a ship for an expedition to Antarctica, but agreed to loan it to Amundsen anyway. So he got the guy's ship, convinced him, hey, let me take it. I'm going to the North Pole. Then he finds out the American made it, but you've convinced the guy to give you his ship instead of him taking it. It's like you still got to do something with it.
Yeah.
Amundsen knew he had to plan a trip to the Arctic, despite losing the race to the North Pole. He departed from Oslo, Norway, on the first leg of his trip on June 7th, 1910, intending to go to the Arctic. Some of his crew noticed unusual supplies were being brought on the trip. An observation house, which wouldn't be suitable on the constantly moving ice sheets around the North Pole. Because there's no land, it's just ice.
Yeah.
And he also brought around 100 Greenland dogs, which could have been purchased in Alaska or Siberia as they got closer to the Arctic. On August 22nd, 1910, Amundsen wrote a letter to Nansen, who he borrowed the ship from, explaining he had changed his plans and was now aiming to be the first person to reach the South Pole.
Oh, man. That explains the dogs.
2.5 months after he left, he wrote him this letter.
So he stole his boat.
Yeah, well, kind of took it under false pretenses, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. He still hadn't told his entire crew that he brought along.
Oh, my goodness.
He only told the ship's officers and his experienced dog driver, who was someone he was kind of close with, I guess.
Most untrustworthy captain.
Well, shortly after their first supply stop at Madeira, a small island off the Moroccan coast, Amundsen broke the news to the rest of the men. So they go to Madeira, get some supplies, and the original plan for their trip to the North Pole had them sailing around South America, putting them very close to Antarctica, before venturing all the way back north, beyond Alaska. He used this, along with the news that they were racing England, made it a challenge, to rally the support of his men, and they were on board. They didn't need too much convincing. I mean, look at that, like, it's less than half the distance to go by ship, so kind of makes sense. Amundsen also sent a telegram to Robert Scott, the British explorer that took Shackleton on his first Antarctic expedition, to inform him of the change of plans, because Scott was preparing for his next expedition to reach the South Pole. So Amundsen's basically like, hey, I know you're about to do this, but so am I. So the race is on. So Scott and his crew, the British crew, landed in Antarctica January 4th, 1911, and set up a base, which was kind of neat. They brought all the supplies they would need to build this little building.
Oh, okay.
And then when spring... So remember, South Pole, opposite seasons from us in the Northern Hemisphere.
Oh, okay,
so
yeah.
They arrived in January, which would have been summer. Like early summer. And then that was when they built the base, set up their building, and then when spring finally came, they started moving supplies further inland. He had this big crew of guys, and they would start hauling supplies further and further into Antarctica and leaving stashes.
Okay.
Maybe 100 miles apart. I don't know exactly how far apart they were, but they would take these stashes so that when Scott was going to go all the way to the South Pole, once he turned around and came back, he would have supplies. Because he wouldn't be able to carry enough. So the first crew for this supply mission was dispatched on October 24th, which would have been like early spring, with the rest following November 1st. And the final support party would turn back on January 4th, 1912, exactly 1 year after they landed in Antarctica. And at this point, so now it's down to Scott and his 4 men who were going to reach the South Pole. Nobody else was with them anymore.
Yeah.
And they were racing Amundsen and the Norwegian crew. Finally, January 17th, 1912, Robert Scott arrived at the South Pole, only to find a small green tent with a Norwegian flag left by Amundsen and his team 35 days early.
Ah.
Yep. So they made it. They just weren't first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Scott's return trip is documented in his diary. They struggled to find the supply depots that were left for them. Blizzard after blizzard kept the men pinned down.
Oh, my.
They would spend days in a tent just waiting for the blizzard to pass before they could move. They were slowly starving, and the first of the men died on February 17th, so 1 month after they reached the South Pole. A month later, another of them prayed he would die in his sleep. Having survived the night, he left the tent the next morning during a raging blizzard, never to return.
So now it's down to 2.
3.
Or 3. Okay.
Yeah, it was
him and
Scott
his
plus
4 men.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, beginning March 21st, the 3 remaining men were trapped in their tent by a blizzard for several days, just 11 miles from their next supply depot, which they referred to as 1-ton depot. Several of the men that came with Scott to Antarctica that were back at the little base they built were starting to get worried because it was taking them so long to get back. So they headed south to meet the men.
Okay.
They waited for 6 days at 1-ton depot. But because of the blizzard, they were forced to turn back. With winter now setting in, because this is March. This was the end of March. So you'd be getting into fall and winter. The men back at the base settled in and waited for spring. They really had nothing else they could do. In October, they would set out in search of Scott and the rest of the South Pole crew. And on November 12th, they located the tent with the final 3 men's bodies inside.
Ah.
Robert Scott had finally reached the South Pole, but he would never return home. And despite not being the first person to reach the South Pole like he wanted, his story, because of their return trip, has largely overshadowed Amundson's, who was the first. So, kind of, a heartbreaking tragedy. There was some, I guess, debate around some of his decision-making. I believe the original plan was for him to take 3 people with him, and he added a 4th. So when you get to the point that they're starving and short on supplies, you figure over multiple months having a 4th person or a 5th person to feed, that would
have added how much extra time if it wasn't an extra person. So.
Yeah, so that may have contributed, but in the end, the blizzards and just what they were up against was too much. Like with Shackleton, he was only 100 miles away, and they were stretching out their rations. They'd managed to stretch those for an extra 30 days, but he made the decision. He cared more about his crew surviving than reaching the South Pole. And if the Norwegian wasn't going out there, maybe Scott would have made the same decision, but he knew this was his last chance to get there.
Yeah.
So, rather sad, unfortunate ending to his tale. Moving on, talk more about Shackleton and the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition.
Okay.
Now, Shackleton became restless in the years following his Nimrod trip to Antarctica. He would not be the first person to reach the South Pole, but he wanted to make another trip to attempt something else. A trans-Antarctic expedition. Meaning, he would cross Antarctica on foot, from one side to the other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He would take 2 ships. They would go to opposite sides of Antarctica, and his men would stash supplies that he would use throughout the journey. So, basically, he would start, his plan was to go into the Weddell Sea and march from there to the South Pole, and his second ship would enter the Ross Sea and do that supply depot thing from the South Pole to the Ross Sea.
Okay.
And now the Ross Sea is where Amundsen and Scott both did their treks to the South Pole. They started in the Ross Sea, and they started basically on opposite sides of it. So they weren't following, each other's footsteps to the South Pole, but Shackleton was going to start on the opposite side and then use that as his finishing point.
Okay.
It was an ambitious idea.
Yeah, I'd say.
And he had to raise private support to fund the excursion. He planned to complete, it would be about an 1,800-mile hike, which is not that much more than his previous attempt to reach the South Pole.
Okay.
Because that was 1,755 miles, I believe.
Yeah.
But he planned to do the 1,800-mile hike in 120 days, which is about 15 miles a day that he would need to cover. And one thing, I think I mentioned it when you brought up Antarctica and the lakes frozen, or under the ice, that Antarctica is very mountainous.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I don't know, it's not what you first think of with Antarctica.
I always would have just assumed flat ice.
Yeah, flat, desolate, icy,
snowy, yeah.
Very mountainous. So any of these, there's a lot of terrain to deal with.
Aren't there a lot of caverns and stuff that just drop straight down?
Yeah, crevasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with glaciers, there's a lot of those where the ice just kind of cracks open and goes straight down for hundreds of feet, maybe. So the other men that he brought with him to the Weddell Sea, they were going to build a base like Scott did, but Scott's was obviously on the other side, the Ross Sea. And I believe the Norwegians also built a little bit of a base on the opposite side of the Ross Sea. So he was going to build one in the Weddell Sea and then hike all the way over to the Ross Sea. His ship for the journey is called the Endurance, and they left a whaling station on the island of South Georgia with 28 men on board in December 1914 and soon entered pack ice. And pack ice is small pieces of ice that have melted and then frozen back together.
Oh.
Something sort of like that. So it's not one solid big ice sheet, but they're frozen back together.
Yeah.
So boats can break through some of that.
Yeah.
And the Endurance was reinforced to protect against the ice. In January 1915, the ship became stuck.
Ooh.
Wedged into the pack ice off the coast of Antarctica. And stuck within the ice, the ship would slowly circulate with the currents of the Weddell Sea. As the ice moved, the ship moved.
Yeah.
And it was clear at this point that the Endurance would be stuck until the following spring, because this being January when it got stuck would have been early parts of summer, and they weren't able to break it free, so it's hunker down for winter. And Shackleton had his crew start converting the ship into a winter station, and he made sure everybody kept busy, and he did his best to keep spirits up. He reassured the men that they would make it home. He made sure cliques didn't form, and he offered personal support to anyone who needed it. So he was just, taking care of his guys, like he did when he turned back from the South Pole.
Yeah.
He cared about the guys that were with him. He also, wouldn't let them stock up, stockpile penguin meat, because that was one easy way to get food.
Oh, okay.
Penguins. He wouldn't let them stockpile it because he didn't want them thinking that they would be there forever. So just little things like that. And then the crew, they set up on the ice. They made these little dogloos, is what they called them. Igloos for dogs. Kind of cool.
Yeah, it is neat.
And the crew passed their time playing football and hockey, racing dog sleds around the ship on the ice. that was home until they could break out of the ice.
Yeah.
For 9 months, the men were at the mercy of the ice. And with spring, the ice began melting. On Wednesday, October 27th, Shackleton had to give the order to abandon ship, fearing that the now melting ice would shift around and crush the ship.
Mm.
The ship was creaking and groaning. It started taking on water. It would tilt and then kind of break free and then go back to being level. So, yeah, he was worried about the ship, so they moved the lifeboats that they had to the ice, and they started salvaging supplies from the ship. They made a camp on the ice about 1.5 miles from the ship, hoping that if the ship would get crushed and break through the ice, that they'd be far enough away to not face harm themselves with that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be... They wouldn't be in a spot where the ice would be cracking because of the ship.
Yeah.
And they called this little camp that they set up Ocean Camp. And there you can see a photo of them, the lifeboat hanging off, and just start moving supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's their little ocean camp.
All the dogs looking at the camera.
And there's you can see the boat leaning.
Oh, my.
But it set itself back upright. Just falling through the ice a different way.
Yeah.
And then only 3 weeks after they abandoned the ship, the ice crushed it and it sank. I can't imagine watching that.
That would just crush your spirits.
Yeah. And there's Shackleton standing there next to, after it's been crushed. And
wow.
It must have been a kind of slow process that it crushed it, but it was still freezing, so it wouldn't fall. It would just kind of get stuck in a different place in the ice. But this was their only connection to the outside world. This was their way of getting home.
Yeah.
So they make camp. They watched the ship sink, and they made camp. And the ice that they were camped on started splitting and moving with the summer months. Yeah. So
that'd be a terrible feeling.
So then about a month after the ship sank in December, Shackleton decided it would be best to start marching west. We can't stay where we're at. They celebrated Christmas on December 22nd and ate a feast with the rations that they had that they wouldn't be able to carry. And then they set out early the next morning with Shackleton and Frank Wild moving ahead of the group to mark the best path for the men pulling the sledges and boats. So there's a good shot of the ship is still upright in the background.
Yeah.
In their ocean camp. They start marching west. They have their dog sleds. They pack as much as they can, but they can't carry everything. At times, it took them 5 hours to move just 200 yards.
Holy cow.
Because they were bringing their lifeboats. They had 3 of them. So on December 29th, after only a week, the ice was becoming softer, making it impossible to drag these boats across. Their sleds were getting stuck. And they hit a point that was completely unsuitable for travel, which forced them to backtrack half a mile. Yeah. It'd be so disheartening.
It would be.
The men, they made camp, and during the night, the piece of ice they were on cracked down the middle. And the ice was becoming too soft to sledge across, but there wasn't enough water yet to launch the boats. So they set up a new camp, which they called Patience Camp. And during their 7 days of hiking west across the ice, they only covered 7.5 miles.
Oh, my.
They would stay at their new camp, this patient's camp, for over 3 months. And because they were so close to Ocean Camp where they had to leave some supplies behind, some guys actually went back there to get more stuff to bring to patient's camp. So it's probably, I guess, the positive of not making it far was it was easy for them to go get more of their supplies.
Yeah.
They were hoping to drift south toward Paulette Island, which is at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. But the ice they were on drifted north instead. They were drifting toward the open ocean, which would mean warmer waters, and the ice was melting beneath their feet.
Oh, man.
They were constantly soaked and in, quote, a state of perpetual wet feet.
Ah.
Yeah. In April, while the men were sleeping in their tents, there was a deep-throated thud, and the ice immediately split in the middle of the camp.
Ah.
The two pieces separated, and the men scrambled to get to the lifeboats. And then someone yells, "Someone's missing."
Oh, no.
So Shackleton rushed to one of the tents that once stood directly over the crack. It cracked right through a tent.
Ah.
And he tore the tent back, and in the water was one of the men still in his sleeping bag. And Shackleton reached into the water and just heaved him out onto the ice. The man, he was soaked, freezing, but he was still alive. Just moments later, the two sheets of ice slammed back together.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, just...
Got him just in time.
The crew didn't take to the sea on the lifeboats yet.
Okay.
Because they were still dealing with these big sheets of ice. So they would damage the boats. That was one thing they were concerned with. But because the ice was breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, they started moving more violently. They'd be covered with ocean water, soaking everything they had. Everything.
Yeah.
Some sections tilted violently, nearly throwing the men and their supplies into the water. The ice just continued breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. At one point, it split, separating the men from their supplies.
Oh, that's like something in a movie.
Shackleton made the decision to abandon the ice on April 9th, and now all 28 men were in the 3 lifeboats, with as much of their supplies as they could fit. And Shackleton personally observed the launching of each boat, making sure nobody would be left behind.
Yeah.
And this is April. And remember, seasons are backwards. They are going into winter.
Oh, my goodness.
They were now contending with the open ocean, which still had ice floes moving around, threatening to crush the boats, and freezing spray was constantly tossed over the boats, and some of the men became seasick. Frank Worsley, who was the ship captain for the expedition, navigated the group for 6 days on these lifeboats, until they finally saw Elephant Island about 30 miles away, which is the red dot on the map.
Oh, my.
At this point, Frank Wild, Shackleton's second in command, wrote that half the men had gone insane. They were struggling from exhaustion and sickness, just going crazy.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, with the sight of land, they were motivated and they rowed toward the island. And they finally, on April 15th, for the first time in 497 days, set foot on dry land.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Be one of those moments where you kiss the ground.
But they were still far from rescue.
Yeah.
Elephant Island was uninhabited, and it was unlikely anybody would be passing near enough to spot them. And they were elated to be there because they no longer had to conserve water like they did on the lifeboats. so they could drink up, they could eat, they could get penguins, seals, those types of things.
Yeah.
And most importantly, they could try to get dry, finally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But after 9 days on Elephant Island, Shackleton set off with 5 other men, and they would need to reach South Georgia Island, where they stopped. When they started their expedition, that was where they stopped. They would have to get to South Georgia Island, which was 800 miles away across open ocean. And all they had was this lifeboat. This was the best lifeboat of the 3, and they prepared it. They, loaded the bottom of it with pebbles so that it would stay, low center of gravity, stay upright.
Yeah.
They loaded it up as much as they could to help with the trip. So you have 6 guys on this little boat, and they set off on just an insane journey to even think about trying.
It is such a small boat to try and do 800 miles on.
Yeah. And, the men on shore were watching them go, thinking, well, hope they make it, but you would never know if they didn't.
Yep.
And they were on the ocean in this little boat for 16 days. They faced 13 hours of darkness each day, but they reached the island. During this journey, they were constantly bailing water from the boat and breaking ice off the sails. They made it ashore, but the whaling station they were trying to reach was on the opposite side of the island. Another 32 miles across mountains and glaciers. And here's a photo I showed before, but just to give some perspective on the size of that lifeboat.
Mm-hmm.
Can see the men standing next to it. That is not a big boat for a trip like that. But
no, and it's even lifted up off the ground there.
Right.
It's...
Yeah. But they made it. But like I said, they needed to cover 32 miles across this island. And they would have arrived on what is the left side of the map and followed roughly that red line.
Okay.
So Shackleton took 2 of his men, leaving 3 of them behind where they had landed on the island, and set out to try to get to the whaling station. After 36 hours of hiking, during which time they hit dead ends that forced them to backtrack, and they literally linked up, wrap your legs around the guy in front of you, hold on to him, and slid down a hillside they were on a sled. That was just to avoid, adding several miles to backtracking and finding a better path.
Yeah.
But they finally made it to the whaling station on May 20th, 1916. During their hike, though, Shackleton and the 2 others, they would huddle together for warmth, and the 2 other men fell asleep, but Shackleton woke them up after only 5 minutes. But when they woke up, he told them, "Hey, you slept for about a half hour." But he knew if they all fell asleep, they might never wake up.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea, this is South Georgia Island that they had to cover.
Oh my.
Yeah, and
I wasn't picturing that.
No, right? If you're listening, reminder, check out the video version to see some pictures. Just unbelievable.
Just rocky.
Yeah, rocky mountains,
Straight
glaciers.
up and down. Man.
When they were 1 ridge away from reaching the whaling station, Shackleton stopped with his men to listen for the 7 a.m. whistle that would start the workday at the station. They heard the whistle.
Yeah.
This was their first sign of another human.
Yeah.
Since getting stuck in the ice.
The motivation that would give you.
Well, yeah. But they still had to cross another ridge. They had to, like, climb down a waterfall. But they made it. They made it to the whaling station. The whaling station manager, when they walked in, asked them, "Who the hell are you?" Shackleton, all he said was, "My name is Shackleton." And, like, the room went silent. Like, everybody just assumed they were gone.
Yeah.
They could not believe this man walked in. He had, like, long beard, long hair, looking rough.
Yep.
But
imagine how much you would have aged in that amount of time, too, though. Just those rough conditions and stuff.
yeah. So Frank Worsley boarded a whaling ship to rescue the 3 men from the other side of South Georgia Island, the ones that came with them on the lifeboat, but they didn't take part in the hike.
Mm-hmm.
But rescuing the men left on Elephant Island would be a whole other ordeal.
Oh, I'd imagine.
With winter set in, Shackleton's first attempt on board a British ship was unable to reach the island due to pack ice. His second attempt on a loaned Uruguayan ship, he again was stopped by ice. In the country of Chile, residents donated money for Shackleton to charter another ship to rescue the men that were still stranded on Elephant Island. 100 miles north of Elephant Island, the auxiliary engine broke down, forcing the ship to return.
Oh.
The guys back on Elephant Island, they took the 2 remaining lifeboats and flipped them upside down, kind of built a little hut out of them. It was tiny and cramped, but they at least had somewhere that was dry that they could keep somewhat warm.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just waiting. Just waiting. Hoping.
Yeah, hoping that
somebody
they weren't forgotten or that the other guys didn't die on their way too.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that you would actually expect them to make it to South Georgia Island.
Yeah.
Because, like, you get in a bad current in the ocean or something.
Yeah.
A ship that small, you're probably just going to sail right on by it.
You already
Never see
loaded it up with how much weight by adding the pebbles in it.
Right. Yeah. The Chilean government loaned Shackleton a ship with a Chilean captain for a 4th attempt. And here's a map of their attempts. The green line is their journey on that little rescue boat from Elephant Island to South Georgia Island.
Okay.
And then you have the blue line was their first rescue attempt, hit ice. The orange line, second rescue attempt, hit ice. Yellow line, third rescue attempt, engine broke. Finally, the pink line, they did make it to pick up the stranded men. 4
Were they all
months.
still alive?
They were all still alive.
That's a miracle.
4 months after Shackleton left on the lifeboat, he finally arrived to rescue his crew. As the boat was approaching, Shackleton shouted, "Are you all well?" And Frank Wild, who is Shackleton's second in command for the Antarctic trip, he responded, "All safe, all well." And Shackleton yelled back, "Thank God."
Yeah. Wow.
Of the 28-man crew, not a single person died.
And that one, imagine how close he was. That was in his sleeping bag and
Oh, yeah. And there were, like, by the end of it, the one guy on Elephant Island, like, he couldn't even walk. I think his feet were frostbitten.
yeah.
And infected and all that. They were not doing well, but they survived, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
Though, a few years later, in 1921, Shackleton attempted to return to Antarctica to map 2,000 miles of coastline.
He's an idiot.
At 47 years old, he died of a heart attack while anchored in King Edward Cove, South Georgia Island.
Wow.
Where he was buried. The same place he started and ended his epic survival journey is where he was laid to rest. Like, what an ending for Shackleton.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So, in February 2022, a team working with the Falklands Maritime Heritage Trust went searching for the sunken ship using a South African icebreaker and remotely operated submersibles. After 107 years, the Endurance was found in March of 2022, sitting 10,000 feet below the sea level.
Wow.
And because of how cold the water is there, it was in remarkable condition. And Frank Worsley, the ship captain who traveled with Shackleton, had predicted the location of the Endurance within 4 miles.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's a picture of the ship before it left. And then you can see clearly the star and letters and the shipwreck.
Wow.
Just really cool. The ship was left where it lay, untouched, and the site is now a designated monument. They had some 3D scans. It's like that's a reconstruct, or like I think they added color or something to a 3D scan.
Wow.
But for the most part, though, it was really well kept intact.
Yeah. I expected it to be a lot more destroyed than that.
Yeah. It
I mean,
cracked and leaking,
yeah.
of course, but to not be split in two
Yeah.
or anything. And the James Caird, which was the name of the lifeboat they took to go across the ocean. That boat is now on display at Dulwich College in London.
Huh. Wow.
And, Shackleton, he's kind of praised for his dedication to survival and the leadership skills he exhibited, keeping his men motivated, ensuring every one of them would survive the disaster.
Yeah.
But that is the insane story of Shackleton and his Antarctic trip.
That is crazy.
Every stage of that could have killed him.
Yeah.
Like, being stuck over winter on the boat was the best point of that.
Yeah.
Because they were still on the ship. But every single thing after that, the trying to march west, there were times, and I read a book about this story. The book is called Endurance by Alfred Lansing.
Okay.
Great book, great story, lots of first-hand accounts from different crewmen. But
Wow.
there were times when they were trying to march, between Ocean Camp and Patience Camp, where when night would come in, if they could see the stars, someone would take measurements and determine their exact location. And they would find that the ice was drifting faster than they were moving.
Oh.
So, like, they were trying to move west and the ice is drifting north. So you're not moving west then. You're just moving north with the ice. And Shackleton would do things like, he maintained order and discipline.
Yeah.
Which was part of just keeping the crew, hey, we got a job to do. And he kept track of, who was in which tent they were assigned. And he took several times. The guy that nobody liked was with Shackleton. Because he didn't want anything stirring up. He didn't want trouble. He didn't like the guy.
Yeah.
But
he could put up with him better than the other guys could, though.
Yeah, and at one point when they were trying to move across the ice sheets, he reread the articles, their rules for the ship. Because of some people complaining and insubordination type stuff, he read that out. Hey, you all agreed to it. I'm in charge. This is what we're doing.
Yep.
And he made it happen. But to put...
the fact that he got everybody home alive is remarkable.
Right. Every step of that could have been the end for... if that guy fell through the ice and they were a couple seconds slower getting to him when the ice split.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ice sheet slammed shut. He'd be gone.
Yep.
So, yeah, just an incredible tale. And
it would have never crossed my mind to, not stockpile food.
Yeah, it's just...
give you a purpose to go hunt, get out, do something kind of thing even.
Yeah, and by not stockpiling it, though, he didn't want them to think we're going to be here a long time.
Yep.
kept them motivated to work toward getting out. And it's just the kind of story that, like, every step you think, oh man, it can't get worse, and then it gets worse. And then in the book, there's so much more detail. Like, I highly encourage anybody to read the book, listen to it, because I think, if I remember correctly, there were points where they would, like, jump into the lifeboats thinking that their piece of ice was about to break apart underneath them.
Oh my goodness.
But then it would hold up, so then they'd get out of the boats and go back to the ice. And
jeez.
But then they also had to keep 3 lifeboats trying to keep together over 6 days to reach Elephant Island, which would have been a whole ordeal. Like, one of them could sail a little faster, so they'd have to hold up and wait. The other one, if it was slower, people would have to do more rowing.
Oh, man. That's crazy. I feel like this wouldn't even be able to be made into a movie. Not to be able to do it justice, it'd have to be multiple.
Right. Yeah. And there are some movies and documentaries. I actually haven't watched any of them. They weren't available on any of the streaming platforms that I have.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd be curious to watch one. But one thing that's kind of cool with this, though, is that there are all these photos.
Yeah, I thought was really cool.
And that's why I wanted to include the pictures. Is like, it adds so much to the story.
Yep.
But they are actual photos from their time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
fact that they actually kept up with taking photos during all that hardship too.
Right. Yeah. And the men that were stuck back on Elephant Island just waiting for Shackleton to come back and rescue them. Shackleton made a plan with them, with his second in command, who stayed on Elephant Island with those guys, that if he did not return, I believe it was 90 days. If he didn't return within 90 days, they were supposed to try again. They would send another one of their lifeboats.
Jeez.
Try again. Like, no point was it, yeah, we're going to sit here and die. It was always, hey, if I die, you
keep going.
I am ordering you, if I don't return, you will go and look for help. Do what you can. But yeah, I think that was supposed to be 90 days. And then I'm looking back at my notes to try to find. It was 4 months from, let's see, they set out on the James Caird in April 24th or 25th, something like that. And they didn't arrive to rescue the crew until August 30th. So a little over 4 months. So I think they were supposed to have left, but again, though.
That's crazy. That's like the, what was it? The indomitable human spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Or something. Like, that's like a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's hard to think, because you hear like, oh, okay, he left in April. They came back. They agreed on, I think it was 90 days. I keep saying that, but I'm not 100% certain. But that would have been dead of winter.
Yeah.
So kind of makes sense as to why they didn't send a second boat out from Elephant Island yet. Maybe they decided to wait until spring at least. But yeah, just a wild tale. Thanks for letting me hijack this episode. I thought it deserves to be,
definitely
the full story. I could have cut out a lot of that at the beginning before.
Yeah, but
this trip.
That's just crazy, though.
It just sets up the scene of how crazy Antarctica was.
And it tells the type of leader that he was, the way that he turned around his first trip.
Yeah, just abandoned. And unfortunately, so remember, he had a second ship going to the opposite side to put supplies. They did not fare so well.
Oh. And
part of why they didn't fare so well was they had no idea that Shackleton was stuck in the ice and wasn't making it across Antarctica. So they were doing their duty to stockpile supplies for him, and they refused to tap into them for themselves, which end up costing them.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so Shackleton's crew all survived despite everything. The other crew, things went relatively according to plan in comparison, but
Yeah.
just a unfortunate circumstance for those other guys.
Mm-hmm.
There you have it. Ernest Shackleton, the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition.
Yeah.
Ship called Endurance. What a name for a crew to go through that stuff. But if you enjoyed that story, like I said, if you're only listening, highly encourage you to go check out the video version. It will be on YouTube.
Slideshow he has put together is great to go with this story.
108 slides with photos. So I put a lot of time in it, so that's one reason why I keep saying go watch it, because I have spent the last few weeks putting all this together. But
yeah,
it really does add to the story. It helps you see what their conditions were. And if you like this story, leave a review, leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, give it a like, subscribe. All of those things would help the podcast. And check out our Instagram, ListenBroPod.
We will do better trying to post.
Yeah, and I'll post several of these photos over on Instagram once this is uploaded. So thanks for checking it out. Hopefully in the next one, Joe's not so bad under the weather and can tell a story. But
yeah, yep.
We'll see you in the next one.
All right.